Welcome to the Legal Advice in Paradise podcast, brought to you by www.legaladviceinparadise.com. Even in one of the most beautiful places in the world, life can be litigious. On this podcast, the best and brightest legal minds gather to help you navigate your way through every legal question you may face. This program will help you know your rights, know what steps to take, and help you find the best legal representation, all in simple, easy to understand terms. And now, here's your host, Justine Gronwald.
Aloha, agents of change. This is Justine with Legal Advice in Paradise. Here again with Steve Guttman, who's a recurring guest on the show. And last time when we met with him, he talked about bankruptcy. For those of you who have not been able to see it, you can just go to www.legaladviceinparadisepodcast.com and just scroll down to bankruptcy and Steve Guttman. For those of you on YouTube, just go ahead and search for his name under Legal Advice in Paradise. And at the bottom of the video, you will see all the resources to his last episode regarding bankruptcy. But today, we want to cover something that's hitting home across America for a while now, and that would be foreclosure and loan modification. And before we start, just in case people haven't been following us to this point, introduce yourself, Steve.
Yes, well, I've been doing this type of legal work since the late 70s, and the issues change a little bit over the years, but a lot of times with the loan modifications and foreclosures and bankruptcy, they do interact. Sometimes you're successful with doing a loan modification, and therefore you don't need the bankruptcy. Sometimes the only way you can get the lender to talk to you is to do the bankruptcy, and then you do the loan modification.
Oh, really?
So there's a lot of interaction between these particular areas, and each person's situation is a little bit different, and it makes for an interesting conversation.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit about since you've been doing this, when have you seen the increase of requests to do loan modifications or foreclosures?
Well, the loan modifications have really become much more prominent in the last few years.
As an alternate.
As an alternative. For quite a while, the lenders really wouldn't talk to you. So you really had to use the things like the Chapter 13 that we talked about in the previous discussion. But when the economy really went bad a few years ago, about 2008, the volume was such that certain lenders realized that they really did need to have another way to deal with it, because their own inventory was getting so big.
Right, because they get stuck with these properties, and they're not in the business of selling homes. They're in the business of making loans for the homes. Right,
and the courts also were getting concerned because the volume of the cases that were being presented to the court system. The judges started asking questions too, in terms of, isn't there another way to handle this? Why, if somebody's got a changed circumstance, that their things have improved, whatever caused the delinquency in the first place is no longer present. Why can't there be a conversation? And then you end up with a lot of people getting into loans that they never should have gotten into, either because of the adjusted rates that were coming in.
And then
those
arms.
The arms haven't happened. So you have a lot of different factors that all fed into a situation where where the resolution of issues through loan modification became much more prominent. And then you have the federal government having sued some certain lenders for their own policies. And part of the cure was that they really did have to have legitimate loan modification programs in order to address the issues. A lot of times, though, the lender still will only start talking after the foreclosure actually has already started.
Let me ask you this. How many months of payments do people usually miss by the time this all happens?
Well, that really varies tremendously with the lender, but it usually is not going to get to a lender's attorney until they're at least 6 months delinquent. And the real question is really for the individual to try to address it before it gets to that point. And a lot of times you don't even have to necessarily be delinquent, though, but if it really is a struggle to make that particular payment, and depending upon what the interest rate is that you're paying, if you can just simply get the loan modified to reduce the interest rate, or you've been in that mortgage for quite some time, and you may not be eligible to get a refinancing, but if you give it a new 30-year amortization, the loan payment, the monthly loan payment's going to go down, and that might make it easier for you to keep the place. So there's, again, a variety of different scenarios.
Yeah, that just brought to mind, what's the difference between a refinance and a loan modification?
Well, refinance is really a brand new loan. The loan modification, and a lot of times, particularly if there's a junior mortgage, if you're doing you may not be able to do a refinance with that first mortgage because they don't want to lose their first position. But if it's the same mortgage that they've just simply have extended the terms, then they're still in the first position in terms of their own priority with what may be a junior lender.
Does someone need an attorney in all of this as far as a loan modification? Because I thought that it's just between you and the lender, right? And
it really should be.
At what point do you help people in that aspect?
Unfortunately, the lenders, a significant number of them, they're not user friendly, and you have to be very persistent, and there's an awful lot of follow-up, and a lot of times you're ending up having to supply the same document multiple times, and people will sometimes just simply give up on the process. And an attorney, you're then able to have somebody who has got regular calendaring systems, is going to be following up on a regular basis, and is able to get the lender to, quite frankly, just simply pay attention to this particular homeowner. It's not a bad idea if the individual makes their first connections directly with the lender. A lot of if they're the exception and the loan is still with a local lender, most of the local lenders here you're able to work with them. But the majority of loans are through loan servicer companies that you're dealing with call centers. The call center may be in India. You may end up having just a number of various issues, and keeping it focused and keeping it moving forward is really what the attorney can help you do.
Okay, because in my mind, I don't think a lot of people know that an attorney would come into play when it comes to, I think a lot of people feel, okay, I can't pay my mortgage, I'll just let the house go, and an attorney doesn't come to mind to help them get to that point. I guess what I'm saying is that how do you help them aside from all the paperwork and?
Well, a lot of it is there's various choices that an individual may have. Sometimes because of the situation being what it is, they really do need to do a short sale. Sometimes you have a situation where the best alternative is what's called a deed in lieu of foreclosure, of simply deeding the property back to, directly to the lender.
Is that something common in Hawaii?
It happens.
Deed in lieu of
The
foreclosure?
deed in lieu of foreclosure. It's not. It's the exception.
Oh, okay.
But it is something that does happen. The lender ends up saving a tremendous amount of fees on their end by if it's real clear that the end result that they're going to get this property back anyway. Even with the increased value, if the property is still significantly underwater, the amount owed is way beyond what the property value is.
Right.
Just simply taking the property back on a volunteer basis and not have it go through the court system. Right now, if you're going all the way through the court system, it's going to take more than a year or two from start to finish. So the lender, as a practical matter, will sometimes do a deed in lieu of foreclosure.
What about, okay, so I myself went through a short sale, and a lot of the help came from the realtor as well as the escrow company. So as far as the attorney, what is their whole position with this?
Well, if it's a short sale, you're usually going to be working with a realtor, and if it's a realtor who's experienced with doing the short sale, then the attorney's fees are usually not going to be very significant. And the lenders at this point are much more receptive to the short sale than they were, if we were saying, having this conversation even 5 years ago. A lot of it is in terms of the attorney, is really seeing if that you've explored all your various options and really made sure that in terms of that particular individual's needs, that you really have addressed it appropriately.
So do you work directly with the homeowner or the lender, or?
We work directly with the homeowner.
Okay.
And the short sale, though, also involves the realtor, because none of the lenders will discuss a short sale in the abstract. There has to be an actual offer on the table before they will entertain it.
Right.
So consequently, the first decision is really whether it's the appropriate thing to do is to place the property on the market. And of course, if you're placing it on the market before the foreclosure action has been filed, you're also then more likely to get a better price, because it's not, even though you may know you're in a stress situation, the potential buyer does not know that, and it is not in a situation where the potential buyer is then taking advantage of the fact that they know their seller is under stress.
And as far as figuring out, okay, should we do loan modification or foreclosure, that's where you help determine where it's going, in the direction it's going?
Yes, and really in determining, in terms of looking at what are their expenses independent of it, of the mortgage. I mean, a lot of times, if you can get the interest rate to a reduction in the interest rate, people really won't be paying any more through the mortgage than they would be paying if they were renting. As you know,
That's true.
the cost of rentals in this state are pretty significant.
Yeah, they are. They're atrocious.
Yeah. In some cases, some neighborhoods. So it really is, again, whether either through having a brand new amortization schedule, taking that, say, the loan balance of $300, that originally when you took the loan, maybe you bought the house 10 years ago, and you owned at that point $300,000. Now maybe your principal balance is down to $250,000, and if you take that $50,000 and re-amortize it over in brand new 30 years, you're automatically going to bring down a little bit what the monthly payment is. And then if you happen to be borrowing the money back when it was, say, interest rate at 6%, and now a current interest rate is more like 4.2, 4.3%. That combination of a reduced interest rate and a new amortization schedule based on your new principal is going to allow for the mortgage payment to be reduced, and maybe by an amount that's high enough that and high enough reduction that you're going to be able to stay in the place that you're living.
Yeah. So it's really unique. I mean, everyone's a unique case.
Right. You have to really look at it, and the lenders are looking if they can see if by reducing it that your housing cost is going to be brought down to say 30% of your income, they're going to be very receptive to that loan modification.
So it really matters what your income is.
Right.
Right.
Right. Right. If your income is just not there, then you start looking at, well, can we do a short sale? And most lenders are pretty cooperative. It gets a little more complex if there are other liens, though, on the property. There's a junior mortgage.
Right, second mortgage.
Second mortgage.
Right, because the second mortgage probably is the one that's going to take a hit, most likely.
Right.
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 Yeah. So what do you see the trend leaning more toward, the loan modification or foreclosure?
Well, a lot depends. Right now, you still have the real property values going up.
You were mentioning before we started this that the values are going up.
Yeah, and so that's partly why both foreclosures and bankruptcy numbers in Hawaii are down, which is a good thing. And as long as the economy stays positive, the tourism numbers and so forth, I think you're going to see a further lessening in the number of people that are facing foreclosure. But with those increased values, it makes it more likely that they can do either a loan modification or a short sale.
Okay. Well, what would you say to somebody out there who's a homeowner right now and they're getting to like 3 months behind, 4 months behind, and there's no way out? What would you recommend that they do?
Well, first off, I'd really have to decide: are they really in a situation where there's no way out? When you say there's no way out, then they really need to put the property on the market. But is it that they fell behind because they had a period of unemployment, and now they are employed? If they're employed, or they had a second job when they were current the mortgage, when they got it, they lost the second job, and now because the economy's improved, they've got that second income again.
It's kind of like our interview about the bankruptcy, right?
A lot of the same interplay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because if they can, if it's just say a 4 or 5 month delinquency, and they're in a situation where they can now pay that current mortgage, that's really what the Chapter 13 is really tailor-made.
Yes, I was going to say, so now they're gainfully employed again, maybe got another second job, or, is better with their income. What happens to that 4 months or whatever? And that's where our last interview was. We take that and assess it, right?
Right.
And then they can pay it within the 3 to 5 months.
Right.
So we're going off a little bit here, but at least it steers them away from the complete foreclosure.
Right. And the other thing, too, is if they think the situation is going to get better again, because, again, maybe it's a medical situation that is curable, is temporary. A lot of times people, out of emotion, just kind of totally react, and they don't pay anything. And a lot of times what it's really important is to keep paying the association. Even though
that's another thing, though. If you have the association,
right? If you have a home, then you're just usually just dealing with a residential
The
freestanding
mortgage,
house,
yeah.
just with a mortgage. But if you're like a significant percentage of people here,
Especially
you
in
have
Hawaii.
yes, you have you're in a condominium, so you have both association dues and a mortgage.
Oh gosh, that's when it gets really tough.
It gets really tough, and if you have to make a decision as to pay one or the other,
Yeah,
you
that's
really-
a good question.
Yeah,
I mean,
who do you pay? And
who
that-
do you pay? Because, the association dues become a lien.
Well, they become a lien, and they also see an association can actually move a lot quicker than the lender can.
As far as,
Doing something adverse to kicking
Oh, my
that will
goodness.
result in you're losing the property.
wow.
So because of the balances that you owe and with the mortgage and so forth, a lot of people think, well, gee, I got to keep paying the mortgage and I'm not paying the
Right.
association. Well, the reality, the practical legal reality is you're better off paying the association because the
Wow.
lender is going to take quite some time before it even starts
Whereas
a
the
foreclosure.
association is right on it.
Yes, they have attorneys already through the management companies that they can call on. The association can do what's called a non-judicial foreclosure. So
Wow.
that moves a lot quicker than going through the court system.
And they can evict you
And they
based
can
off
evict
of
you.
association fees not being paid?
Right, and you do have the situation sometimes because people don't have a consultation with an attorney that you're dealing with an eviction that on relatively small amounts
Yes.
in terms of
Yes.
and occasionally you'll get the newspaper story about a very extreme example of that, but it's not that common, uncommon, where somebody is the amount that they owe to the association is somewhere between it's maybe $10,000, less than $20,000, and they're being evicted.
So how many months in arrears before you find yourself being evicted by the association? Usually.
Well, it really varies. I mean, some associations are much more active than others. I don't know if there's a real time period, but there's no question that overall an association will move a lot sooner to evict than the lender will, because the lender has to go through certain notices that they're required to give you before they can evict. They then it has to go to the attorney. The attorney's got to give a 30-day notice. Then the foreclosure starts. You got to get served with the complaint. And there's a whole other sets of notices that go through the foreclosure process. The end result is that it's pretty safe to say that if it's more than a year from when you stop paying before a lender will evict.
Now
Before
association
will move a lot quicker, is much more likely to move a lot quicker.
No, if they hire somebody like you and they say, and you tell them what you just told me is that, hey, if anything, try and keep paying your association fees. Are you apt to write a letter to the association on their behalf or something, or?
Well, the legislature has basically told associations that if somebody is presenting a payment plan to deal with the arrearage, and that payment plan is for 1 year, is to repay while you're keeping current, is to repay what has accrued, and you can do that over 1 year. The association is really under an obligation to accept that payment plan.
And is this where you come in to?
And we can do that and assist them.
Okay.
And a lot of times, while they're trying to figure out what to do with the mortgage, and while the loan modification program, which usually will take a few months to get processed, you don't want to have it all undercut by the fact that they haven't paid the association.
Wow.
So-
I'm glad you brought that up, because that didn't even occur to me, that the association dues might do you in way before the mortgage lender.
Right, and you have actually a phenomena that's occurring more and more, where the the person has stopped paying on both, the lender will be moving forward as to maybe a foreclosure process, but the association will do a non-judicial foreclosure, and actually will take over the ownership of the property.
The association?
While the lender is still going through its foreclosure. The person ends up being evicted. The association gets repaid because they're renting out the unit.
Wow.
And then after, and by the time the lender has done the foreclosure, it's well,
What
it really was
happens-
the exception.
what
That
happens
extra
to
income
the-
ends up being an income source for the association.
So what happens to the tenants once the foreclosure is already done? I mean,
Well, the owners, we're talking about owners, not the tenants. I mean, if
Yeah.
somebody, I mean, there's certain rights a tenant has in terms of.
yeah, I was going to bring up the fact that, okay, so the owner got evicted, the association took over, they put renters in there to help pay back, and then the foreclosure is done. So now you have those tenants that were renting from the association that took over the property. They have rights to stay in there?
Well, under that scenario, they're going to be on a month-to-month.
Oh, okay, so it's not a long-term
Right,
type of thing.
right. It's a little different if you've got somebody who's got a year lease.
Right, that's what I was going to ask.
And with the lender. But the association, if there's already a tenant in the unit, will just direct that the payment go to the association
Oh,
as
I
opposed
see.
to
So there's
the original owner.
Okay. So I
Yeah.
thought it was owner occupied.
If it's owner occupied, that's where the person will get evicted a lot quicker if they haven't paid the association, as opposed to if they're
Yeah.
current with the association and they're just dealing with the lender.
Yeah, I was thinking of a different scenario where the homeowner occupant got evicted. The association put a renter in there. That's how I was thinking of
Yeah,
it.
in that situation, they'll be on notice that there's a foreclosure going on.
Oh, okay.
And it'll be
that's why it's a month to month.
It'll be a month to month,
I see.
or maybe a 6 month if the process started,
Mm-hmm.
or it may very well be that because of the slowness with certain lenders, the association may have totally completed the foreclosure even before the lender has gotten around to file the lawsuit.
Wow, there's so many avenues this thing can go.
Right.
Yeah, so I can see where a typical homeowner, without some someone like you, to guide them through it. That's just, I think a lot of people just throw their hands up and wait till they get evicted, or just leave and then just leave it the way it is.
Yeah, I think it's a kind of a very human emotion just to throw up your hands and just, but in most situations there really are alternatives.
Okay.
A lot of times it's how do you maximize, even if you know you're going to eventually lose the place. How do you at least maximize your stay in the unit, and maybe by just paying the association, even though you can't afford the mortgage, you're staying in there for another year or two. If you really do put aside the money that you're saving because you're not moving into a rental, you're then going to have a better financial situation.
Okay.
You may actually build up a little bit of savings.
Wow, did you
So-
hear that? That was like a loophole.
Well, it's a matter of
It's real.
it's real.
Yeah, yeah.
If you really think it through, and they have some little guidance about how to maximize the particular individual's situation.
Okay. Was there anything else you want to cover? That was pretty thorough, I think. I think we even went down an avenue that I didn't think was going to come up, and that has to do with association dues, which a lot of people here do have condos, townhouses, subdivisions.
Right.
They all have association dues. I don't think anybody thinks about that how important it is,
Right. I don't think. Yeah. There's no reason that most people are going to know
No.
that the association can actually process a foreclosure a lot quicker than a lender can. And because of that, your priority needs to be given to the association.
Well, I'm glad you
Another
brought that
thing,
up then.
related to that is even if you go through all the way through a bankruptcy, if you're still owning and living in the unit, you're still responsible for the current association dues.
Oh.
So you don't want to be getting rid of all your debt through a bankruptcy and then immediately start accumulating new debt because you haven't paid the association.
Wow.
So
that association dues, that's something. But I'm glad you brought that up because,
My pleasure.
I was just focusing on what we can do with the mortgage, either modify the loan or just go through the whole foreclosure proceedings. But that little side thing about the association dues, wow, that's
right.
came out of nowhere for me.
Yeah, and a lot of it, on the foreclosure side, in terms of what is the homeowners, what is their long-term plans? Because if the lender has to go all the way through the process, it's quite likely, you can end up living in the place for 18 months without any particular problem, just because of the timelines that are associated with the court process.
Right.
So just because you fell behind doesn't mean you have to immediately move out of your home.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of people think immediately. Oh my goodness, I'm going to lose my home. What do I do now? But I think there's so many people that have been through it. They'll tell their stories, about. But I think it's all individual as well, right?
Well, it does vary.
Yeah.
It does vary, but
yeah.
the timelines, for the court are their process just like any other lawsuit, and so there's certain notices that have to go out, and there's certain documentation that has to be provided.
Lots of documentation.
Lots of the documentation. If the court and if it's not properly documented, and most of the time, the overwhelming number of times, the lender will eventually get the documents together. But just the mere fact that they're forced to do so will slow down the process. And
meanwhile, you just stay put and try and restructure your life as best as you can.
Right.
And then if they come to you, for that guidance, it should be a little bit smoother, more smooth, than if they were to just take it on themselves.
Right, and it may be in the in-between time, because at one point you could afford it, and now you can't. Maybe the things that made you put you in a position that you could afford it may start happening for you again. So during any time until the process is over,
anything can happen.
right.
That's good
God
to
works
know.
in mysterious ways.
Yes, isn't that
Yes.
great?
Yes.
Ooh, I like that. I like ending that way.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I think
Any suggestions as to when they should call you, at what point? That some people out there listening might be at different points in
well, once
situation.
they know they're falling behind or they're about to fall behind,
Yeah.
they really should consult with the attorney. The sooner they consult with an attorney, the more options that are available. If you let it go, it's not that you don't have any options, but you may lose some of your options.
I
So
see.
early is better than late.
Okay. Then I think that's a good ending.
All right.
Thank you again, Steve.
My pleasure.
And as always, for the video, we're going to shaka out.
Okay.
And in the audio, we're going to say aloha and a hui ho.
Ahuio. Thank you.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Legal Advice in Paradise podcast. For more information, visit www.legaladviceinparadise.com.